My name is Zen. Thank you for coming. I see some familiar faces. Okay, I'm a stay-at-home mom. I have 3 children, and I've been around the liberty movement for a while, I guess. I wanted to come and speak about free birth, which for those of you that don't know, free birth is the birth of your child at home without a midwife or a doctor assisting you. And it's a choice that I guess most would say is controversial, and a lot of people will even say is dangerous. I've had some people say that I am on the fringe of child abuse because I chose to give birth to my child at home by myself. So, does anyone have any questions about the concept just first? No? Okay. What led me to free birth my child was the reaction I had to my first birth, and that was in the hospital. And I guess for most people it would have been a perfect natural birth, except it wasn't exactly what I had expected. When I had gone to the doctor for all these months, you share all these experiences with the doctors, you ask all your questions, but when the time actually came for the birthing and laboring process, she just wasn't there for me. And it really threw me off that the person that was supposed to be helping me give birth wasn't there for most of the time. So it was really hard for me, and then some of the things we had talked about that was supposed to be a part of my birth plan just kind of got thrown out the window at the last minute, and like no one seemed to care. It really wasn't like an issue. You were a patient, and you were there to be taken care of as quickly and as easily for them as possible. Sorry, the experience is just a little. When I was pregnant with my second child, I wanted to do more research, and I knew that there had to have been a better way, and that maybe someone who would respect my opinions on the kind of birth that I want. So I looked into a midwife, but I lived in Ohio at the time, and the laws that the midwives have to follow, they have to do procedures that are like the hospital births that I wasn't really comfortable with. Like they had to check the progression of my labor every like 10 or 15 minutes. And the last thing I want to do is have them doing the fetal monitor on me when I'm trying to labor. So the more I had researched what my options were as far as home birth, I had really just thought, you know, my first birth was so easy, could I just do this myself? If birth was as dangerous as society tries to make it seem, would we even be here as a species? You know, women are giving birth, you know, in the middle of war. You know, they're giving birth when they don't have food. They're squatting out in the desert giving birth, and we as humans are still here. So the idea that birth needs to be managed by professionals, and it needs to be watched at every second, looking for things to go wrong. It really kind of makes women fearful of the process of their body that's supposed to give them the most power that they're entitled to as a woman. I think once you give birth, you kind of have a different reverence for life, and you kind of have this feeling like you can do anything. If you could do that, if you could birth your baby, you could do anything. You've looked death in the face, and you've looked life, the birth of life in the face. The way that society views birth now, they've made women afraid of their own biological functions, and they've made women afraid of the possibility of bad things that can happen, so much to the point that they give up all of their power. They don't even want to know what could go wrong. They don't want to know what they can do to make it better. They've given away all of their choices, and they don't want to be responsible for what might happen. So they go through the hospital system, and you have someone else tell you what's going on with your body. And you have someone else tell you what can go wrong with your body. And then when it's all done, all the respect and gratitude goes to them because they did it all for you. So the idea, while radical in a sense, it kind of came full circle for me. Like, I had an easy birth, maybe I could do this myself. So it really became a searching process then, and an education for myself, and what could go wrong, and preparing for that, and what could go right, and just trying to... Okay. Choosing to free birth is not something I would say is for everyone. I think that the regulations that are in place, it causes a lot of women to feel like they don't have any other choice when it comes to birthing their kids, that they have to choose to maybe learn to do it themselves instead of being forced into a system that doesn't listen to their wishes anyway. I've heard a lot of horror stories. I don't like to only look at the positive. I've heard a lot of horror stories about home births and even a couple of unassisted births. And most of them would have been preventable if people had done enough research. I wouldn't encourage people to choose to birth their own children without an attendant if they don't want to put in the legwork and the research in order to learn about not only how the whole process works, but what can go wrong, what situations you need to transfer for, and easy ways to move along labor and the progression of it without having to have intervention. I think that if women were more able to take a hold of their birth empowerment, that we would have a whole new generation of people, that people would have more respect for themselves, they would have more respect for others as well. But I think that it makes a whole new breed of parents as well when they're willing to understand how these processes work, and they really want to know. They really want to know and take care of it themselves, and they're willing to put in the time and effort. And it's not for everybody, but it does work for some. And it can be an incredibly healing process for a lot of people who might have been scarred by the system being put through it. Do you have any questions so far? No? Okay. Yeah?
Do you live in New Hampshire now?
I live in South Carolina right now.
Okay, so what are the laws like there as far as midwifery and home birth?
In South Carolina, we have much better laws. My first free birth I did in Ohio, and that's where the laws were much more restrictive. And there, the midwives have to be nurse midwives, and they have to follow all of these same procedures that I'm talking about. They have to follow basically all the same procedures as an OB in the hospital. And where I'm at now in South Carolina, they license lay midwives, so it's not as big of a problem. However, the amount of lay midwives is so, there's literally less than 20 midwives in the whole state of South Carolina, and most of them are only working in birth centers. So even then, it's hard to have a home birth. I think for me, with my hospital birth, it really pushed me towards trying to find something else. When I had my hospital birth, the first 8 hours of my labor were rather easy for me, and I was at home, and I was in and out of the shower, and I'm squatting and walking around and just working through it. It wasn't as bad, you know. I didn't get the sense that things were progressing as much as they were. It was my mom who was finally, they're 4 minutes apart, we have to go to the hospital. And I was like, no, it's not time yet, it's not a big deal, we don't need to go. But she insisted, and I went to the hospital, and when I got there and they checked me, they're all freaking out. They're like, she's 8 centimeters dilated already. and it's gonna happen soon. And they put you in the wheelchair, and that's it. They hook you up to an IV, and you get strapped to the bed. And you get I had the monitor strapped around me, and my legs up for random people walking in and out to see. There had to have been 6 people in the room. There were my legs sprawled. And I was laboring at home in peace in the dim, in and out of the water. And I come here to these bright lights and all these people. It's amazing that I had my daughter a half hour after I got to the hospital. So it was still very quickly, but knowing about the research with other animals, when they're observed in labor, it causes way more complications. It causes labor to stall. It causes all these problems. But with humans, we stick them in a room and we throw their legs up and have strangers walking in and out. And then we're confused when labor doesn't progress. And we're confused why the baby's having a hard time coming down when we're having them sitting in a way that's opposite to gravity. My doctor, too, we had talked about the whole episiotomy thing before it happened, and I wasn't super educated back then, but I had known that the episiotomy was an intervention that generally wasn't needed. It generally caused more healing pain. So we had talked about it, but she was very...
What's the word you're saying?
Episiotomy.
What's that?
Episiotomy is when they slit down the vagina to make more room for the baby to come out. They say that you need it so you don't rip as much. However, the research shows, yes, the research shows that the episiotomy causes deeper and longer tears. If you think about a piece of fabric, if you try to rip it, if you put a little slit in it, it's going to rip more when you... But they've been doing it, and it's routine. The research is totally against it, but it's so routine in the system, they just do it. And at the last minute when my baby is crowning, she goes, I'm going to cut you episiotomy, and she goes, I'm going to tear, I'm going to cut you, and she just does it. Like, my baby is crowning, I'm like in the most vulnerable position you can imagine, and she just, I felt absolutely violated. We had talked about it, she knew I was against it, and she just cut me right there, and it was, I was worried about tearing with my second because of the episiotomy. Healing from it was awful. It took like almost 3 weeks from the stitches and everything that they gave me, and I didn't even need. But when I had my second child, I was worried about the tearing, and I tore a little bit along the episiotomy scar, but I let it heal naturally. I didn't need any stitches, you just keep your legs together. But it was healed and it didn't burn less than a week later. And I had dealt with almost 3 weeks healing the time before. But then even my third birth, I didn't even tear it off. So it's kind of come full circle.
You mentioned being able to be more mobile and stuff during your free birth. So what would be, I guess, some exercises you could do if you're going through a free birth? Because I know they kind of like tie you up and you're in the hospital and you're out of your
God.
You're saying that you're more mobile and you're able to do different.
I would say let it loose because just everything. Like I would walk through contractions, I would squat through them. Hanging on like the shower bar, just hanging on anything can feel the relief. Whenever I'm in transition, what really works for me is being on my hands and knees and just rocking my hips back and forth and moaning. I mean, really letting yourself loose. It's really hard. It's really hard because we're so concerned about what other people are going to think. But in birth, just letting your body guide you and what motions or whatever sounds you're going to make. It's a little embarrassing, but I think there's like a labor voice because there's just this kind of deep vocalization that just happens in the throes of labor that I could never mimic. But just moving around in and out of the water, warm water really helps a lot of the time. Just moving. Moving, squatting. As the baby goes down through the pelvis, the baby has to rotate. The baby really has a lot of a lot of work he has to do to get out of there. So all the squatting and moving around the pelvis really helps to send the baby faster, and it's easier for the mom. That's another thing they suggest just before to start labor going. Just stay upright. Let the gravity help you. Don't make it more work than it needs to be. Yeah.
Do doctors give a reason for why they put women on their back?
It's easy for them. Yeah. Some places they'll use the birthing stool, but still the doctors don't want to be all like this waiting for the baby to come. They'd rather stand here. Okay, we'll check again in a couple minutes. Yeah, but I mean, just laying down there like that, it tilts the pelvis up. So I mean, you're trying to push the baby up against gravity as well. No indigenous people have ever birthed like this. I mean, they don't. I mean, even had Indian women would birth by themselves, and they would put blankets in a canoe and birth over the canoe and stuff. So it's all very. I don't know any woman in labor who, if given the choice, would lay on her back. It's just seriously, like even just trying to rest in labor, if I lay down or whatever, I mean, you wouldn't lay on your back for longer than 5 seconds during a contraction. It hurts way too much. Yeah.
If you don't mind saying for your second and third births for unassisted,
Yes.
what position were you actually in when the baby came out?
Both of them were hands and knees, and that's just really good for me with rocking the hips back and forth. I don't know how else I would get through transition without wanting to die. Yeah, it's intense. But another thing that I like to do too during the time is everything gets so hot, like in those last minutes, and it is like the most intense perception you'd ever have. Like everything is like high def, like in the moment, so second to second, and yes, the pain is intense, and I would spray myself with water. They would have never done that in the hospital, but I'm like, get the water, spray me. But yeah, hands and knees both times.
You said, what made you decide to have the home birth in the first place? Or, well, unassisted birth versus getting a midwife? I know you said that you were in Ohio at the time.
Yeah, I talked about that before you came
Sorry.
in. No, it's okay, hon. Yeah, when I lived in Ohio, and the regulations were really restrictive, and they only have nurse midwives there. So the nurse midwife was required by law to do so many checks every so often. I think my biggest problem was the fetal monitor, that she had to check me every 10 to 15 minutes. And to be honest, sometimes when I'm laboring, I don't want anyone there, let alone someone prodding me every little bit to make sure the baby's okay, like the baby's okay.
I was just curious. I live in Indiana, and they just passed the law to, for certified midwives to do home births.
So,
but
nice.
I'm on my third, and I have all of mine at home as well, or my other two. But, it was hard to find a midwife, but I didn't care about the law.
Yeah, that's kind of
The
why.
unassisted thing, I think, is amazing. I just don't think I was, I wouldn't have been able to.
No, it's not for everyone. It was the right choice for me, and it was something that I was passionate about, and it took a lot of research. I wouldn't suggest anyone doing it and just being like, oh, I'm going to just have a baby in free birth and not learn anything. You laugh, but it's serious. It's serious because I read horror stories, and I've read horror stories about stuff that happened, and when I read it, it's just like, it didn't need to happen, because if you studied at all, that's a transfer. Don't do something like this because you're afraid of the hospital, and because you don't want to let that fear stop you from going and taking care of something that you need to.
So if you're unassisted, and something does go wrong, what are the steps that get taken to get assistance?
Well, I guess it would depend on which situation, but most of them you would just transfer to the hospital.
So you would just call someone who is going to be waiting in case there is an issue?
Well, I know. Some of the people that I know that have free birth, they've had a midwife on call, or they've had a midwife in the other room, or for me, I would have just gone to the hospital. There's really only a couple serious things that can actually go wrong with a normal birth. Most of the bigger problems can be screened out ahead of time. So there's really only a couple things that can happen that you would need to transfer. But even those things, you generally are going to have 20 or 30 minutes to transfer to get it taken care of. As long as you're not putting it off and, you know, where the situation would get worse. But if you know what you're looking for, and you prepare, these are the situations, if this happens, we'll transfer, if this happens, we'll transfer, then it's really not as risky as we've been led to believe.
I was going to ask, what are the major things that you have been worried about?
Okay, I guess the biggest ones will first you have a cord prolapse. If the umbilical cord starts coming out before the head, that's a problem because it can compress the oxygen. You're going to have damage. So you would go hands and knees with your butt in the air, so the baby shifts forward, and it takes the weight off of the cord, and you're going to have to transfer like that. That's one of the biggest things. Your other biggest things would be hemorrhage, and there's herbs for that you can take to lock down the hemorrhaging. I started to hemorrhage, I think, a little bit in my second, and I took shepherd's purse, and it literally cleared it up. Within 20 seconds under my tongue, the bleeding just stopped. Oh, shoulder disc. I'm like, I'm missing a big one. Thank you. How do I pronounce it? Shoulder dystocia. Yes, shoulder dystocia. That would be when the baby's shoulder gets stuck behind the pelvis bone. Generally, the woman just needs to move around and work her hips to get the baby to corkscrew out through the pelvis. If you would need to, you would, like my husband would have, you would hook underneath the shoulder with a finger and try to corkscrew out. But generally, it's the woman just needs to move around. But those are generally the big three ones that you would be looking for, unless you have a big rush of bleeding after when the baby's being born. Then the placenta may have detached early, but still, most of those things, there's still time to transfer. It's not life or death in that moment, and most of the things that would be life or death in the moment, you would be screened or know about ahead of time. You know, generally, I don't think we give enough appreciation to a woman's intuition, but I think that most women, you're very aware during birth, and I would encourage if women were to do this, if you feel fear, like serious, like something's wrong, don't deny that. Don't be like, oh, I wanted to do this, I don't want to go to the hospital. Go to the hospital if you feel like something's wrong, I need to go. Don't ignore your own intuition.
You mentioned dimming the lights. What other changes, adjustments did you make to the sensory environment?
Okay, yeah, dimmer lights, warmer. Warm is another thing. That was pretty much it. I liked being able to go outside as well, being able to get some fresh air, a lot of change of scenery. Sometimes if labor stalls, getting out to some fresh air, walking around, change of scenery, just feeling like things are normal, you know, like it's a normal thing that deserves reverence, not something, you know, we need to be all freaked out about.
I've read that Finnish women and Russian women used to regularly give birth in the sauna.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be on full blast or anything like that, but it was isolated, sterile, source of water. But have you heard anything about being in like a slightly hotter environment?
I don't know if in transition I would want to be in a hotter environment. I'm usually having people spray cold water on me because everything is like so hot and like intense.
Yeah.
Like deer in a headlights. But definitely warmer. I wouldn't want to be somewhere cold during the whole laboring process. But in the last part of giving birth, I don't know that I'd want to be in a sauna.
Yeah, so obviously with the free birth, you don't have anybody necessarily present during
Well, I
birth.
had my partner, but.
Okay, but like somebody who's a professional.
Right.
So during the pregnancy, though, do you have somebody that you work with? Did you work with a midwife or an OB the whole time?
I didn't. I know some women who do. They'll go see a midwife or a doctor for their prenatal. I personally didn't. You can order all the urine strips. You can take your own blood pressure. You can do your own weight. You can measure your own fundal height. Most of the stuff that's done at prenatal appointments, you can do yourself, and would cost you $20 in supplies for the whole pregnancy versus all of those appointments. Some women I know have gone and gotten ultrasounds. There's a lot of places you don't even need a doctor. You can go and pay for a 3D ultrasound if you want to go do that.
I just wanted to mention for those people who free birth isn't for them, getting a doula can absolutely heighten your chances of achieving the birth experience you want and avoiding those interventions.
I would agree. Yeah? I would agree. I wish that I can't believe I didn't know about a doula the first time I read all the pregnancy books. That's how awful the education is in those books, right? I wish that I had gotten a doula. I think that my first birth would have been better because I wish I had someone that would have been like, no, episiotomy, you know, because I couldn't do it at that moment. But I think that it's a great option for women who are going to go into a hospital or even with a midwife to have someone specifically there for you to take care of you, you know, to make sure that you have the confidence and you have the support that you need, because to be honest, a lot of times in birth you just need someone who's just like, it's okay, you're going to get through this, you're going to be able to do this. Women have been doing this forever and all the other women have faced the same brick wall of I don't know if I can do this as you did. So yes, thank you for bringing that up. Everyone should have a doula, and in actuality they should have multiple doulas. Any other questions?
Do you have to sterilize the room in some way where you're going to be?
Well, no. Generally, the hospital environment is actually more dangerous as far as infection, because when you're at home, you have all the antibodies for most of the stuff that you're exposed to.
Right.
So, I mean, obviously, you know, your scissors for cutting the cord and, and you know, don't be stupid. Wash your hands. But I didn't do anything different as far as sterilization. Just lots of shower sheets. Any other questions?
I guess I was just going to ask, I brought it up about doula, but if you know, I can see what the benefits are of home birth over hospital birth, but what are the benefits of being completely unassisted versus having someone there who you trust who's trained in some way, like the doula, or if you had been able to find a midwife that was able to?
I think yeah. If I had been able to, I think the state plays a lot in this decision for most people. To be honest, I would probably prefer to birth with someone there just so I wouldn't have to deal with it. I think that this is a choice that a lot of women are feeling not pushed into, but maybe it's kind of one of their only choices because of the system we have now. I don't know though, my second one, I guess I could have gotten a midwife in the area, but after doing it myself the second time, it was kind of like, well, we're having another baby.
Do you know, are there, will doulas generally, because I know they always make a very big deal, like, we're not trained medically, will they not be out of birth unless there's a doctor or midwife there?
You know, I've seen it go both ways. I've known some people that the doulas they approached wouldn't do it, but I've also known a couple women who, yeah, they had doulas but no actual midwife. So I think it just depends on the doula's comfortability.
I think it also depends on the
state maybe?
sanction
Yeah.
against the doula, because in some states, a doula is there and is perceived as providing medical care, even if she's
Yeah,
not.
so if she lays one finger on the baby,
Right, then she could be put in a cage, right? But then there are other states where they don't make that kind of definition about, delivery as being medicine, and so those rules are probably more comfortable.
Well, that's another thing too that I didn't even mention is that technically, my partner could be in violation of delivering a baby without any professional licensing because he simply caught the baby. I know. So just saying, if anyone had ever asked me, did he catch the baby? No.
Let's fall to the floor.
Yes, onto the pillow. Nobody caught the baby. But luckily, it's not illegal anywhere for you to birth by yourself. There's no law that says that you cannot birth your baby by yourself.
I just also want to point out with the doula thing that it also depends on what organization the doula is certified through.
Oh, okay.
I'm a doula and I started out certifying through like the one biggest organization, and then I looked over all the rules and they say specifically if you are certified through us, you cannot attend an unassisted birth.
Really?
You can they have all sorts of rules. You cannot use aromatherapy. You can't, bring your essential oils.
It's not aromatherapy.
So yeah, then if the doula is not certified at all, she can do whatever she wants. But then there's also other organizations that don't have the kind of rules on what you can and can't do.
Overregulation.
I have a question for you. Do you feel that if you were in a state situation where states were not sanctioning the midwives from being able to help you in the way that you wanted? So for example, if you were able to find a midwife who was totally on board and said, oh yeah, I'll wait in the car, I'll wait in the living room, you do your thing by yourself, you want me to bring you a cup of tea, you want me to wash your kids, that kind of service.
Yeah.
And the state wasn't going to sanction her for not doing all the tests and procedures that the state thought she had to do. Do you think that would have made it more of a comfortable idea for you with your second as opposed to going unassisted? Or do you think you chose unassisted specifically because you really just wanted to?
I would say it was the first leading into the second. I think I went searching for it because I was even looking for midwives off the record. I don't care if she's licensed, if she's got people I can talk to, But everyone is so closed because you can go to jail for it. So everyone's very hush hush, even if they do know the people that are doing it under the table.
Because like here in New Hampshire, we've got this certification of midwives. It's supposed to be all legal and all of this. But yet the midwives here have their hands tied behind their back and they can't assist certain types of women.
Yeah.
So the women themselves ultimately should be the deciders of where they birth and with whom they birth. Right?
Yeah, we have the same thing down in South Carolina. A lot of the high-risk pregnancies, they're not allowed to touch. And even in South Carolina, you have to have 2 prenatal visits with a physician. Not just the midwife. You have to be checked by a physician as well. So even then, it's very...
What other time in a woman's life does the state come in and say you have to see her?
I love how they're pro-choice. You can choose to get rid of your child, but you can't have much choice in how you want to birth your child.
As far as the birth certificate goes, it's like how safe is it to not give to a birth certificate? How hard is it?
Well, it goes both ways. Some do get the birth certificate and some don't. Getting the birth certificate isn't actually as hard as you think. It's really just affidavits, just signing that yes, she was pregnant, yes, this is the baby that came out.
Wanting to avoid it,
Huh?
I would be wanting to avoid it.
I personally did avoid it for my 2 kids. Even then, without the birth certificate, a lot of people are like, well, they're going to have such a hard time, they can't do all this stuff. And it's true, there's a lot of stuff that you can't do, but the thing that I love is that you can get a passport without a birth certificate or a social security number. They don't really tell you, and you have to do a lot of searching, but all it takes is 2 affidavits that say, yes, it's their child, yes, we swear it, and you can get a passport without the birth certificate or the social security number. So that was something that also played a role in my decision in doing this. Obviously, with a midwife or a doctor, it would have been more assumed that I'm getting the birth certificate. I didn't really have to discuss it with anyone. That's a good question.
A little trick at the hospital is when they give you the paperwork, you just say
call, because I knew a lady, she had her birth ended up at the hospital, and she didn't want the social security number. And the nurse did it anyway. They had a big discussion about how she didn't want it. The nurse still checked it off and sent it out. She had this big ordeal with the IRS, and they still would not, with the IRS, with the Social Security. And so they still would not revoke the number, even though she herself did not check it off. The nurse did it and sent it off anyway. So that's a good idea. I'll take it home.
I had a friend who chose not to do the birth certificate for her infant, and CPS got involved because of her choice.
Through the hospital?
No, she didn't birth in the hospital, but because of her choice in birth location. And so they removed the baby from her without a birth certificate, which means ultimately the baby's not a citizen.
I usually hear too, the birth certificate or social security number that actually gives them the power to CPS your children.
Which is why she didn't do it, because she was like, I don't want CPS involved in my kids' lives. And they actually filed for the birth certificate as the
They filed, did they write themselves as the parents on there as well? Any other questions?
Did you have words with the nurse that cut you?
It was my doctor that cut me. No, because I was right at the crowning and there was nothing else going on.
Not afterwards either?
No. To be honest, I was pretty upset about it, and my last appointment that I had with her was just very short. Check me. That's it.
I just want to say that I had the exact same experience with my first birth in the hospital, where I said ahead of time, no episiotomy, and then even at the time, she said, oh, I got to do an episiotomy. I said, no, don't do it. Do not cut me. And she just went for it anyways.
Yeah.
Like your consent doesn't matter when
Yeah, it
you're
doesn't
cutting into your
matter.
body.
It doesn't matter.
Well, because the admission papers in the hospital that,
Yeah, and I signed
when
the
you
whole-
say you're there for medical birth, it includes amniotomy and episiotomy typically.
Can you not sign it?
Yeah, or you can cross it out, or you can say, upon my consent at the time before you sign it.
Is it actually a meeting thing at the time?
No, that's not. I'm so cynical.
Any other questions?
I'm wondering what your thoughts are and anybody else's on like what we can do to get more options for women, because I know there's a lot of people trying to pass laws, and like I'm from Illinois, where you can have a home birth with a nurse midwife, but there's like 7 of them, and they have to follow all the rules and everything. And then there's also certified professional midwives from the surrounding states who are amazing and brave enough to go and risk their freedom to go attend births. But anyways, there's this group of women who've been trying to get the laws changed for years, like 11 or 12 years now. And every time that it gets voted down, they tweak a little bit, and they make it, the midwives are a little bit less free to make their own judgment calls. And like at this point, if they get it passed, it's going to be like the midwife you're going to have is going to be basically a doctor anyways, because of how strict the law is going to be. I feel like we might just be better off not even going for it and just having more underground midwives. And I don't know, I'm curious about New Hampshire, if anybody can tell me what the laws are here in New Hampshire.
The problem with a lot of these movements to try to license these midwives is that they're putting themselves under state jurisdiction, and then they lose the right to be able to support women the way that they want.
Right.
And women lose their own choice. And they're going about it wrong, because what needs to happen is there needs to be some sort of statement in the law that says that women get to choose where they have their babies and who they have their babies with. So you can choose a CPM, you can choose a CNM, you can choose your next door neighbor, you can choose your babysitter, like whoever you want. Because ultimately it's your own sexual process and it's the products of your own livelihood. But in New Hampshire, even though it's a little bit freer for the midwives, like you said, if you're high risk or you have something that's a little bit different than what the state thinks you should be doing, then the midwife is supposed to turn on you basically.
I think the actual law that's the problem is I think what they charge them with is practicing medicine without a license.
Now, yes.
Maybe we could get rid of that somehow.
No, well, in Maine has a really good law. Maine says that midwifery is not practicing medicine, and that's it. That's the only thing on the books. And so they're not licensed, and the mothers are kind of understood that it's not medical, so they can pick who they want.
Do you have to be a resident in some of those states to make those laws applicable? Like,
No. Just need to be there. There's lots of women who will actually go to different states to birth so that they can be in a situation that they like. Any other questions?
When are you moving to New Hampshire?
I keep hearing that all week. It's cold. I'm from I'm living in South Carolina now. I used to live in Chicago, and I don't want snow again.
It's not like Chicago. It's not in summer. This is beautiful.
Well, this is northern New Hampshire.
Right now, but walk in the shade.
Even in the summer, it's cold.
I packed for summer, and it's not.
2 hours south of here, it's summer.
It's the same way in
Is
Oregon.
it?
Yeah. It's the same way in Oregon.
You need to do hot and cold exposure, saunas and steam rooms, and then cold plunges, and then it won't feel as cold. It's good for you.
That's the winter one.
Can last forever. Make it to the first winter you said.
I would say in what you're talking about before, I would say that I think the biggest shift that really needs to happen is going to need to come from women. And I think that the medical system, how it is now, it's forcing that reaction from women. I think that women free birthing is a symptom of that. It's a symptom of a broken system. So although, yes, every time we make more laws, it gets more and more restrictive for midwives, but at the same time, I recently saw it go the other way. You know, down in South Carolina 2 years ago, we legalized the lay midwife that are CPMs, so I think that's a step in the right direction. It really has to come from the people, and the women are going to need to demand it. The women are going to have to choose that they want to be in control of this process of their body.
What exactly would a legislative effort look like in order to have birth freedom? I mean, you'd have to write something up in your presentation and all that, but I'm like, what words would you use? Would it be? I'm thinking of legalese because it's being.
Well, I like what she said about remain.
We just did a summit in Oregon called the persecution of midwives as a global human rights issue. Because ultimately, when you persecute midwives, you're persecuting the mothers themselves and their choices. Because we're just other women who just want to help other women have this unassisted birth with help, right? I mean,
pretty much. You just want someone there that's going to that will let it happen naturally and will stay back.
Ultimately, that whole scope of if a woman wants to go to the hospital, she wants to be home, she wants to have somebody there, she wants to be completely alone, doesn't even want her partner to touch her, like she should have that right and that ability to do that. And the attorney that I did that summit with put those words together. She said that any sanction that's placed against someone who's supporting a mother is ultimately infringing on that mother's choices. And so there needs to be some sort of statement like that, or some way to disengage the state from it.
It seems like any legislative effort's going to have to go up against it's for the children.
Oh yeah.
It's sympathetic automatically, men and women say, well, we're just protecting children.
Right. From their own parents.
Their crazy parents.
Why don't we hear more about these issues from mainstream feminists?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
As
I
part
would
of the
love
bundle
to
of women's
know.
rights.
That's one of my issues with a lot of feminists. They disregard a lot of issues that are important. Yes.
Because it's related to mother.
Yeah,
Mother's considered.
Exactly. It's so dead on.
I think that's only some feminists.
Oh, absolutely. I consider myself a feminist, but I think generally when you say the term feminist, people have a very rigid idea of what you're talking about.
And we as libertarians need to change that.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So should we say liberal feminists?
I just say feminist, and people can deal with me if they don't like how I label myself.
And I think there is a concern because you are seeing this push to get government more involved in a woman's right to do anything, whether it's to birth your own children or what kind of contraceptives or whatever. She's saying you're seeing like a lot of backlash and a lot of the government needs to get out of our bedroom. But with Obamacare and all of these things that are coming out, they're saying, well, it's okay for the government to come in sometimes. And yeah, I think more libertarian feminists need to stand up and be like, no, we need to get this completely out, and especially with a focus on birth, because it's, I mean, that's, you know, of paramount importance. So
something so important that they shouldn't. They want their hands in it, right? Life, birth, and death.
I really appreciated what you said about the how empowered birth changes culture.
Yeah.
Because so much of my experience with the state and with the authoritarian kind of mindset of the police and the state officials, and it reminds me of kids who don't have moms. Like they've got that ego, they're just like, I gotta be something, I gotta, you know. And when you have empowered parenting and you have children who are experiencing that, they grow up kind of knowing their worth without having to victimize other people to make that part of their
absolutely. It concerns me as well how detached women are through the process. They don't even, just learning to check your pee for your prenatal and learning to measure your fundal height and how far along you are. It just seems like, isn't that something you should know if you're pregnant and giving birth? I mean, if you have a cold, you know what to check for, coughs and fever. You know, if you're pregnant, why wouldn't you want that information? And I think that a lot of the medical establishment isn't very forthcoming about it, and when they are, it's generally only from a fear perspective. This is what could go wrong, this is what could go wrong, this is what could go wrong, instead of informing you how easy it could go, how it could go right, that if this goes wrong, we could make it right like this. But generally, they only offer for them to fix it. It's never, you can do this to fix it, you could do this to feel better. It's usually, well, I can do this for you. I can do this to you. So the whole process becomes very depersonalized, and instead of being a woman going through a normal process of your body, you're sick. There's something wrong with you. Let's see how sick you are. Let's see how sick you might become. So I think that that's one of the major issues. And I think that it's going to need to be a cultural shift from women. That I think I've talked to so many women that are very scarred by their birth experience and what happened to them and the choices that they weren't allowed to make. And I think that the more this keeps happening, the more restrictive it keeps getting, and we're getting up to only almost 30% cesarean rate. That's insane.
40%.
In Southern California, I know some hospitals in New York City are doing 50%.
Yep.
It's insane for a lot of the. Yes, you can schedule the birth. The doctors can go home before dinner time. It's very good for everyone, except the babies and the moms. Any other questions?
I didn't even think that they did episiotomies anymore. I thought that was...
It's routine. They just did it to me because, yeah. And she's screaming now. They do it anyway. I hear it all the time.
I thought they stopped doing that back in the 80s.
All the research from the 80s shows that it's all negative, has no benefits, causes more problems. They still do it.
Or create a fistula or something to make it happen.
To be honest, I think it's kind of a power trip. They want to control birth. They're there to control and manipulate the situation. And what's more empowering than being able to control, life coming into the world? So.
And they're surgeons, so they know how to make incisions and sutures.
Well, absolutely. That's another thing with the training that most of the OBs and even the nurse midwives, they're trained to fix problems. They're trained to look for problems. They're trained to expect the worst and take care of it. So they're looking for any tiny thing that might go wrong. And at the same time, all these, these doctors, they're humans. They've seen the bad things go wrong, so they might be more worried about a specific problem. So that one they're iffy about. So anytime there's any symptom that might be the problem again, they want to take care of it right away. So, but what happens is that women and babies it becomes very automated, just slice and deliver, but women and babies obviously become dehumanized within the whole process. And I think that the more it's been happening to women and the worse that the system's been getting, more women are rebelling and more women are having midwives than ever before. More people are having home birth than ever before. And it just keeps multiplying. So I think that the shift is happening. Any other questions? All right, well, if there's no other questions, I'll be done. Thank you for coming.
Why do we sit down when all should be standing? And why do we back down at the critical moment, like running away from the waves of the ocean? We head for the hills with the high tide approaching, as sand slips away from the castle. When it's time to stand upright, why do we falter, like placing our freedom on the sacrificial altar? We hold tight to our fears and defend our oppressors, as we fight for their lives and become the transgressors,